States Military Academy at West Point. He attended infantry officers' basic training at Fort Benning in Georgia and undertook his rotary and fixed-wing aircraft training at Fort Rucker in Alabama. He was selected by NASA as an astronaut in 1985 and he's flown on 3 shuttle flights. STS-38 in 1990 was a classified mission for the Department of Defense. In 1991 on STS-48, he and the crew deployed the Upper Atmospheric Research Satellite. And in 1994 on STS-62, he was part of the crew which carried the United States microgravity payload up for its second flight into space. He's currently the owner and operator of Vintage Flights, an organization dedicated to the preservation of World War II training aircraft, and he is with us today to share his remarkable perspective on all this history. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome astronaut Sam Gemar.
All right, thanks, Sam. Thank you. All right. Well, it's my great pleasure to be here. I had the opportunity to visit with many of you here, going around the tables here. It's a lot of fun. We've got a lot of guests from UK here. We've got Japan represented. We've got Germany represented. We've got Ireland, Wales. We even have a few here from the US. So it's great to have everybody. Well, I'm going to share some stories with you, and as I tell everybody, I have 1 million stories, some of them actually true. All right? So I'm going to share some of those with you today, and then at the end of that, we're going to give an opportunity to answer some of your questions. Right? This is your opportunity to ask questions about space travel and living, working, playing in space. Hopefully, I'll have an answer for you. Before we get to your questions, I have a few questions of my own. I want to know, in the simplest of terms, what do astronauts do? Yes, right back there. What do they do? Absolutely, we go to space. That's right. What do we do when we get there? Yes. We explore planets. How many of you guys have ever been to a planet? Nobody? Nobody? Just a few of you have been to a planet. What planet have you been to, sir? There you go, the planet Earth. That's a trick question, right? I ask that question all the time, and people look at me like I've got 4 heads, right? Nobody's ever been on, nobody's ever been to a planet. We've been to the moon, but nobody's ever been to a planet. Well, I beg to differ. We all live on a planet. It's called planet Earth, and everything we do in space is about creating a better life here for us on Earth, right? So that's always a trick question. You bet. So we do explore planets. What are some of the other things that astronauts do when they're in space? How about somebody here? Anybody? Yeah. Okay, we explore. What kind of things might we explore? Yes. Planets. Okay. What else? What else? But how about science and engineering and some of those kinds of things? Material science and medical science. So we'll do a number of medical and material science projects. We'll explore things about our universe, gamma ray observatories, deep space probes, and those kinds of things. Do a number of deployments and that kind of stuff. So those are just a few examples of the kinds of things that astronauts might do. We've repaired satellites, we've launched satellites, and of course on the International Space Station right now, much of the work being done on the International Space Station is life science. Right? Trying to understand how the body performs and reacts in space. Well, what do you think some of the difficulties of spaceflight might be? If you had to pick probably the most difficult part of spaceflight about the whole thing, what would you say? What would be the most difficult part of spaceflight? Yeah, getting there is a pretty good guess, right? We launched with 6.5 million pounds of thrust. Right, spacecraft weighs 4.4 million pounds as it sits on the launch pad. When we light those engines, right, we're going to unleash 6.5 million pounds of thrust. You're going to be riding a 500-foot flame, burning 10,000 pounds of propellant every second. Right? So anybody that thinks that riding a 500-foot flame is particularly safe, today I made arrangements with our exhibit folks here. We're going to put a 500-foot flame on your fanny and see how safe you feel, right? There's a lot going on in the back of that bus. What else might be difficult about space flight? Yeah?
The night before.
About what?
The night before.
Hey, there's you go. You must have been at my 11 o'clock. Huh? No, that is probably the most difficult part of the spaceflight experience, right? Is what this guy said. Tell me again what you said. The most difficult part of the spaceflight experience.
The night before?
Yeah, is the night before. When you were in your room alone with your own thoughts, 8 to 12 hours before liftoff. And you honestly have no idea what the outcome of tomorrow's flight will be. 331 astronauts have flown in space. 29 have lost their lives in the pursuit of that dream. And those are tough odds. Those are tough odds. We've got 150 people in the room here maybe tonight or today. That means that 10 of you, or 1 in 15 of you, right? 10 of you don't get to leave. Right? Those are tough odds. Right? Those are tough odds. So the night before, you can't help but think about that. And I tell everybody, it's not that I worry about myself and my own personal safety, although I've decided that I have a whole bunch of unfinished business out there, things that I would like to do. But it wasn't that I feared for myself or my own personal safety. It's that I feared for my family. Young children, spouse, mom and dad, brothers and sisters, friends and relatives that you leave behind, right? Whose lives would be shattered in a moment of tragedy out there. Irrevocably changed forever. And so that's why that night before matters. How many of you kids ever have arguments with your parents? Really? It's not just my kids? All right, that's good to know. I asked that just because I can't believe it's not just me and my kids that have arguments, right? But one of the things that kids don't understand, mom kids, they're starting to get it, is the reason we all want what's best for our children, right? We want them to have a better life than we had for ourselves. And sometimes we disagree on the process and the means to do that. A number of years ago, my son, who's now, he's not here today, usually around times he'll be here, but he's not here today with us. He's over in Orlando. But he was grousing about something he wanted to do. And it wasn't that I didn't want him to do it, it was just we just ran out of time. We're getting ready to do a 14-day mountain trek, and we just ran out of time. And so I said, listen, son, I said, one of these days, you're going to come to realize all the blessings in your life, right? All the blessings in your life. And I said, when that day comes, whether I'm here or not, you're welcome. And I think he got it. So, yeah, kids, we always want a better life than for you guys than we had for ourselves. But that night before, that's why that night is always so difficult, right? But when you get up the next morning and go out here and launch this vehicle, you're absolutely ready for this flight. People's lives are depending on you to do your job, and your own life depends on you doing a good job out there. So we'll get strapped into that spacecraft. About 7 seconds before liftoff, those main engines come up to speed. And that whole vehicle is just going to sit there on the launch pad and rock and roll, right? That whole thing is just going to sit there and shake. It's going to rock forward about 18 inches. When it comes back top dead center, solid rocket boosters light off, and you are literally catapulted into the sky, right? There's no shutting those engines off. The main engines you can, but the solid rocket boosters, there's no shutting them off. You are going someplace, right? Maybe not where you intended, but you are going someplace, right? It's on a pretty dynamic period. And of course, we're going to go through ascent. The first 2 minutes and 5 seconds, you're going to be on the solid rocket boosters. Now, at 37 seconds after liftoff, the main engines throttle back down, and you feel that throttle down. And that's to get us through the period of maximum dynamic pressure, where the aerodynamic forces are greatest on the spacecraft. And so we throttle those engines down to get us through that period, and then they throttle the engines back up. And of course, you can feel that throttle up. And many of you will remember during the Challenger accident, the go-at throttle-up call was the last call that came from the Mission Control Center to the Challenger crew prior to the vehicle breaking apart. And so when we get that go-at throttle-up call, that's always an emotional time on the spacecraft, right? And you're glad to be off of the solid rocket boosters. Once we separate from the solid rocket boosters, it's a pyrotechnic separation, right? Big explosion, flash of light, And of course, solid rocket booster is going to float free. Now, my first flight, it was at night. And our training prepares us well for most events, but it didn't prepare us well for solid rocket booster separation, in that, you know, the last thing you want to see and feel going uphill is a flash of light and an explosion, right? And so when we got to space, I told the commander, I said, you know, boss, you could have better prepared us mentally for this pyrotechnic separation, and he kind of gaffed me off. And so people asked, you know, all right, on subsequent flights, when you've had rookie astronauts on your flight, did you warn them about that? There's just a few things that they have to learn on their own, right? So, but once we get to space, of course, we're just going to unbelt our seatbelt, and we're going to float free and just coast now for the remainder of that mission, for the duration of that flight. We're traveling at 17,300 miles an hour. Right? Now that's pretty fast. We're going to go around the world once every 90 minutes. Right? Once every 90 minutes, we're going to travel around the world. And I, ask people all the time, or tell people that it's hard to get our head wrapped around that 17,300 miles an hour. Well, that's 10 times faster than a speeding bullet, right? As it exits the muzzle of a high-powered rifle. And this is not just a few grains of lead. We're talking about a 240,000-pound orbiter being accelerated out to 26,000 feet per second. So like I said, 10 times faster speed. But to put it in perspective, it's something that we can all appreciate here. While you're seated here at lunch today, enjoying lunch, for every beat of your heart, you would travel 5 miles. 5 miles for every beat of your heart. How many of you are staying in Orlando this week? That's a 10-second trip. All right, I think we can all agree that's fast, right? All right, well, I'll tell you what, Jake, where are you at? Let's put you to work here and take some questions.
Yeah, if you have any questions for Sam, please feel free to go ahead and raise your hand. We'll bring the microphone to you. Questions about launch, landing, astronaut selection, astronaut training, anything on your mind. Let's go ahead and start right here.
Hi, we were in your talk earlier on and you said that you were in space for 24 days. What do you do for the rest of the time?
That's a great question. What do we do for the rest of the time? My dad asked, he wanted to know the same thing. He said, my real name is Charles. So, he said, listen, Charles, you were in space 5 days, 14 days. What did you do the rest of the time? You were there 12 years. Right? All right. Astronaut training. No. All astronauts are really selected to support the manned space program. And so we'll have a number of technical jobs in support of the manned space program. For example, I worked in the Mission Control Center for 13 flights. I was engineering liaison from the astronaut office to the Kennedy Space Center for about a year and a half during the return to launch, after the Challenger accident. I've done probably a year and change in the Shuttle Avionics Integration Laboratory, where we test all of the software that is on board the space shuttle, every new software load. At that time, we were delivering a new software load every 6 months, and of course, all of that software has to be tested to make sure that it meets the specification. So I did that. I was also in the space station, basically design office as a liaison between the astronaut office and space station design team in cruise systems. So those are just a few jobs. Oh, and then I had a punishment tour. I call it a punishment tour. It really wasn't. I actually had fun doing it. I was the chief of the astronaut appearance office. So we did about 5,000 appearances. Not me personally, but the astronaut coordinated about 5,000 appearances during that year. So those are just some of the kinds of jobs that we'll do. And of course, we're training the whole time. We're in the training rotation, so we're flying the T-38 aircraft for proficiency. We're in the simulators every week. And we're in classrooms every week. So all of that training continues whether you're assigned to a flight or not.
Okay, got a question right over here.
themes that keeps recurring for me as I travel around here is this failure, this theme of failure. There's a lot of failure. Can you talk a little bit about how you may have used failure to become a better astronaut?
Ooh, well, yeah, I mean, the thing that, the specifics of that, I mean, astronauts compartmentalize our lives, right? And so, when I say we compartmentalize our lives, I mean, I'm an engineer and scientist, right? Mostly engineer. And so, we think differently. How many of you are engineers or maybe married to engineers? Yeah, oh, good one. So you know exactly what I'm talking about. So we compartmentalize our lives, and these are sometimes very narrow compartments, and nobody else is allowed in them, right? And so nobody else is allowed in these compartments. So it causes problems in our personal lives, I think, probably more than in our professional lives, because in professional life, that's what we have to do to survive. So as an example, when we're on the launch pad, my life is 8 minutes and 34 seconds long, right? If I get through that 8 minutes and 34 seconds, then I'll worry about on orbit, right? Which is going to be days long. If I get through the on orbit phase, then I'm going to crawl into a different compartment that's called re-entry. And that re-entry compartment is about 70 minutes long, right? And so we have these very small and narrow, and that's what keeps us alive, because we have to exclude everything else. As an engineering test pilot, again, same thing. I've got, test vehicles are not often lost. Well, they're often lost, not in the testing of the aircraft or the specific test that's being conducted, but between tests when they're distracted. Right? So again, if I have an engineering test point, I'm looking for that aircraft to be on condition, whether it's airspeed, altitude, configuration, right? Aircraft configuration. Those are the things that I'm concentrating on. And then that's at the exclusion of all else, right? So I'm not sure I'm getting to answer the question exactly, but to your point. When you say that we tend to concentrate on the failures, I don't spend much time on the successes, because that's not what hurts me. It's the failures that hurt me. I have to be planning not just the next failure. I'm looking at the next 2 to 3 failures deep, right? Now, when we design aircraft, we tell pilots out there and passengers alike